Michael Singleton's here, radio host on Sirius XM, formerly of the Mitt Romney presidential campaign. Hey, it's good to see you here.
Hey, Leland.
There's this populist wing in the Republican Party as well, and it's an important part of the Republican base. The fact that Republicans came out so strongly against student debt and now are sort of gleefully celebrating that the Supreme Court ruled in their favor, don't they risk alienating this populist part of their base when education is such a good thing for them?
They do. And I have to be honest with you, Leland, while I don't necessarily disagree with the ruling, I mean, the Supreme Court was right in terms of the executive's ability to unilaterally forgive debt. I do think that in theory, the idea of forgiving this debt was a good thing because of the net benefit for the economy. And I don't want to give an economics lesson here, but that's not what the case was about. It was about whether or not the executive has this unilateral authority to forgive debt. It does not. And the Constitution is quite frankly clear on that. This is probably going to be a congressional issue. Now, to answer your question about the politics of this, however, this reminds me, Leland, very eerily of the abortion issue. And I'm really concerned that if the Democrats can mobilize younger voters the way they did women, this is not going to be good for Republicans in November of 2024.
Yeah, you think about sort of the parallels here, right? 2021 was Glenn Youngkin's election in Virginia. Education was the top issue, which really became sort of a proxy for critical race theory being taught, the COVID lockdowns, all of this was a stunning win by him in Virginia, flipped a state that had gone for President Biden. Then all of a sudden you get to the 2020 Dobbs decision overturning Roe, boom, things flip back. The education issue moves back, and the Supreme Court decision comes up. I'm wondering what the parallels here, because we have this sort of wild time in American history that you have people who say, look, I'll let my kids, take standardized tests. I'll have them, I'll recycle. I'll do all these things. But you want to teach my kids critical race theory, or you want to have my daughter have to be in a locker room with a boy, that's enough. And believe it or not, the Moms for Liberty convention now in Pennsylvania, 3 years ago, this group didn't exist. Now they're one of the most influential Republican groups. Here's Ron DeSantis and Nikki Haley today at that event.
Are you in favor of eliminating any agencies? I know conservatives in the past have talked about closing the Department of Education. Would you do that?
So we would do education, we would do commerce, we do energy, and we would do IRS.
How are we supposed to get our girls comfortable with biological boys in their locker room? And then recently, John Hopkins comes out with the definition of a woman. Did you see what it was? A non-man. They are literally trying to erase all the progress we have made in all of this time. And then everybody wonders why a third of our teenage girls last year seriously contemplated suicide?
All right. The education issues, they are for Republicans. It's something that the center loves.
No, well, let me address Nikki Haley's. Well, let me address Haley first, because that's an easier one for me. I mean, we know what the heck the definition is of a woman and a man, Leland. We don't need to go through this, my friend. We all have taken basic biology.
You know what I'm going to say? Not only don't we need to, we're not going to. Okay,
right.
Let's just
even
stipulate and move on.
A sizable percent of Democrats, Leland, even believe that this has gone too far, especially Democrats of color on the gender issue. So I won't even respond to that. But in terms of the Department of Education and, the governor of Florida, we're going to get rid of the IRS. We're going to replace them with what, number one? And number two, Leland, let me just be frank about this. I completely understand the critique from conservatives, being a conservative, on these institutions in terms of whether or not these institutions are inappropriately targeting conservative-minded individuals. Are these institutions trying to teach children things that parents may not necessarily want? Those are all legitimate concerns, and we absolutely need to tackle them. But Leland, when we're facing against countries like China, right, where their average cost of college is $2,000 compared to around $20,000 in the U.S., where the government there affords most of the students by significant subsidies to get an education. Why? because they're focused on kicking our butts, Leland, in every single sector you can think of. This is a national security crisis. The United States doesn't have time to play these games about whether or not we're going to educate our kids.
Thanks for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to subscribe. Click the red button to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.